Hey mate, it's me, your hunch. I gotta say, nothing feels as good as taking a punt on Betway's for to score. 1 or 2 goals feel like this. 3 like this. But picking the first goal scorer in 4 selected matches sounds great.
Heed your hunch with Betway's 4 to score for the jackpot. UK and Ireland customers only. Selections must be submitted before kick-off in the first eligible match. Where there is more than one winner, jackpot will be divided. 1 entry per registered account holder per round. Full terms apply. Bet the responsible way. 18 plus on louis.net.
Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 15 episode of the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. It's a special week for us here. We got Saturday night football on top of the normal Thursday night football, Sunday football, Monday night football. Gotta love these Week 15, 16 Saturday night games. Let's get into the first one. We got the Bills at the Broncos. I'm starting Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley. Zach Moss got more work last week, but he's still splitting with Singletary, and it seems like the Bills' go-to goal line play is either Josh Allen running the ball or throwing it to one of these 5 tight ends that they have. So I'm still sitting Zach Moss. Melvin Gordon and Tim Patrick, I think, are the only reliable, confident starts to me for the Broncos. And I'm really not even super confident in either of them, to be honest. Melvin Gordon is still splitting with Phillip Lindsay, and Patrick is one of the many options in Denver. Noah Fant left the game last week with an illness, which is weird. You don't really see that all that often. He's got a good matchup here, but with the Bills, but he's become one of the more sketchy top-tier talents as far as tight ends go. He should be a lockdown 100% play every week kind of guy, but he just really hasn't been like that this year. The other Saturday night game, Panthers at Packers. Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore both dealing with some injuries here. Not sure. Actually, DJ Moore is a COVID thing, I think, but not sure if they're going to be able to play. Mike Davis, 2 touchdowns last week with 5 catches and 100 total yards. If Christian McCaffrey is out, play Mike Davis. Packers have been very much generous to running backs. Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuels, both starts to me, especially if DJ Moore is going to be out again. Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, and I think Robert Tonyan has entered the must-start territory. 4 straight games now with a touchdown. Jamal Williams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, they're both dart throws to me. MVS probably has more upside because it really only takes 1 catch for him to produce for you. It's usually on one of these 50, 60-yard bombs, but that's what he does. I wouldn't start him unless there's absolutely no other options for you, but he's not the worst dart throw out there. 49ers at Cowboys. Man, this used to be a special game, but not so much anymore. Raheem Mostert had 51% of the rushing attempts and 4 of the 7 RB targets last week. Jeff Wilson got the other 40% of the rushes, 3 of the targets, but he did get the goal line carry, and he scored. I think both of them are starts here against the Cowboys. I think the 49ers are going to wipe the floor with the Cowboys. Brandon Ayuk led the team in targets, catches, and yards last week with Deebo Samuels leaving early in the game. These two are going to be one hell of a combo once Kittle is healthy. And I think Ayuk is a start this week, whether Deebo plays or not. I think he's going to see a lot of targets. Jordan Reed, Ross Dwelly, Kyle Juszczyk. These are all dart throws, if you ask me. Not guys I want to trust on championship weekend in fantasy football, or at least in the semifinals, whatever it happens to be for your league. I'm sitting Zeke Elliott. Gave us a nice 4 yards per carry last week, caught 2 balls, but still not enough. And this 49ers run D is really good, so I'm not playing Zeke this week. I might also consider sitting these Cowboys wide receivers because they've really all become very touchdown dependent, and I don't see the Cowboys scoring much in this game. If there's one guy to play, obviously it's still Amari Cooper, but I don't know, even that seems sketchy to me. Seahawks at Washington. Not sure if if Antonio Gibson's going to play in this game, but he's definitely one of the few guys for the Washington football team that I'd be comfortable starting. For the Seahawks, though, it's still Chris Carson, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. I know Lockett hasn't really had a good game in a few weeks now, but you can't sit a guy that has a 76% catch rate with Russell Wilson throwing him the ball and a 23% target share in this offense. He's had two games with 3 touchdowns this year. So he has as much upside as any wide receiver in the league. Lockett is a guy you kind of, if you ask me, you ride or die with him. You keep him in your lineup, and if you lose because of him, it's just the way it is, I guess. That's fantasy football. J.D. McKissick, Terry McLaurin, the only 2 guys I'd be willing to start for Washington right now. Logan Thomas, maybe. 40 targets. He's third on the team in targets now behind McKissick and McLaurin. He caught 6 of his 7 targets for 43 yards last week in a very tough matchup with the 49ers. So I do think Logan Thomas is one of the safer tight ends. He's only going to probably get you, 6 or 7 points in a PPR league, but with tight ends the way it is right now, I mean, you can. That's all you can really ask for is if you're a consistency guy like I am, a consistent 5 to 7 points every week. You're not just holding your breath for a touchdown every week. Chicago at Minnesota. David Montgomery has been on a roll to finish the season, 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. The Vikings have allowed the 9th most rushing touchdowns this year. 9th most rushing yards this year. He had 17 fantasy points in Week 17 last year against the Vikings when their defense was much better than it is right now. I think Montgomery is a start again this week. He's been pretty awesome over the past few weeks, over the past month now. Allen Robinson continues to show that he is definitely a number 1 wide receiver, top 12 in the league, no matter who the hell's throwing him the football. And you got Jimmy Graham caught all 4 of his targets last week, and he scored. Cole Kmet was second on the team in targets again last week. I hit on his yardage prop last week, and I will be interested in it again this week. The Vikings have a high yards per reception, so I think either of them can be starts against the Vikings this week. And I think Cole Kmet is a guy that I will very much be interested to see what his receiving yard number is going to be. And then the obvious starts is going to be obviously Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, and Justin Jefferson for the Vikings. If Kyle Rudolph does not play, Irv Smith is going to be a very interesting play, especially for DFS. The Bears have been very bad against tight ends this year. It's kind of weird, but they're they're not doing very well. Patriots at the Dolphins. Damian Harris, Miles Gaskin, Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker, a lot of guys who are questionable going into this game. I think it's probably going to end up just being Sony Michel and James White, but it doesn't really matter to me. This Dolphins defense is pretty damn good. I don't want to start any Patriots players this week, to be completely honest. The only way I would consider one of these 2 running backs between Sony Michel or James White is if Damon Harris is 100% out of this game. If not, it's just going to be a 3-headed trot fest, so I'm staying away. Devontae Parker missed the second half of the game last week. If he plays in this game, I think you got to start him, man. He's really, besides Gesicki, he's the only real threat that the Dolphins have, so if he starts, I'm playing him. Mike Gesicki had his second splash game in a row last week, but left the game, I think it was midway through the 3rd or 4th quarter with, I think it's a shoulder injury. The Patriots are the 3rd toughest matchup for tight ends, and although the Pats' defense has not been great this year, they've been really tough on tight ends. I have Gesicki in all 5 of the leagues that I've made the playoffs, so it's going to be really tough for me this week. So I'm going to have to decide between him and Hunter Henry or Hayden Hurst. I think those are really the 3 options that I have in all those leagues. 2 of the leagues are dynasty leagues, so I do have some other options as far as those leagues go. But as far as my standard, normal PPR leagues, it's going to be Gesicki versus Hurst or Hunter Henry, which I'm not really liking any of them, to be honest. But I'm having a hard time seeing myself playing Gesicki, really, even if he is healthy, because the Pats have always focused on taking away what you do best. And right now, what the Dolphins do best is beat you up with their tight ends. If Gesicki is out, it opens up some interesting prop bets for Durham Smythe and Adam Shaheen. So that's going to be an interesting look for that game. The Patriots have allowed the 7th most rushing yards this year, but and with it not looking great for the receiving core for the Dolphins, you got to figure that the Dolphins will be looking to run the ball. Myles Gaskin would be the guy, but he was put on the COVID list on Saturday, so there's really not very good chance that he's going to be able to play. DeAndre Washington led the team with 13 carries last week, but if Matt Breida and Salvin Ahmed play, all three of them are going to split the work. So unless Gaskin plays, I'm staying away from all the Dolphins running backs. One guy I think could be worth his weight in gold as far as DFS goes is Lynn Bowden, rookie 3rd-round pick that was cut by the Raiders earlier this year. He tied Mac Hollins for the team lead in targets last week, had 82 yards. If Gesicki and Parker and Jaheim Grant all miss this game, I think Bowden will be the most productive Dolphin, and I think you can get him at a real nice cheap price on daily fantasy right now. So he's one guy I'll be looking to as somewhat of a sleeper, I guess. Jaguars at the Ravens. So it looks like Gardner Minshew will start, as he should, if you ask me. He's their best quarterback. James Robinson is a matchup-proof running back at this point. You got to start him. Then there's these Jacksonville wide receivers. So you got DJ Shark, has 4 catches on 16 targets over the last 2 games. He's turned into nothing but a boomer bust deep threat guy. I'm not playing him. Keelan Cole had a great game last week, 7 catches on 12 targets for 67 yards and a touchdown. Plus 7 of his 12 targets came with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, including the touchdown in the 4th quarter. But he's had 3 other games this year with over 14 half PPR fantasy points, and he's averaged 3.8 fantasy points in the 3 games following those big 14-plus point games. So he's just too inconsistent for me to trust in the fantasy playoffs. Plus, the Ravens' corners are tough. They're just going to beat you up at the line of scrimmage. So I think I got to stay away from Keelan Cole. Laviska Shenault hit his high water mark for targets last week with 11. He gets a carry or 2 pretty much every week as well, but I can't trust him either. I think I got to stay away from all these Jaguar wide receivers, but if I had to pick one of the 3, I think it would have to be Keelan Cole. Mark Andrews, at least 5 catches in 3 straight games now, averaging 78 yards per game over the last 3 games. The Jags have allowed the 2nd most touchdowns to tight ends, so Andrews will be the anchor of the touchdown tight end ticket this week for sure. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards scored 3 touchdowns between the 2 of them last week. Dobbins got 13 carries to Gus's 7. I think we can flex both of them this week because Mark Ingram didn't see a single touch last week, which is a huge surprise. He actually only played 1 snap, while the 4th running back on that team, Justice Hill, played 6. So I think we can confidently play either J.K. or Gus this week. Marquise Brown, I think I saw he was put on the COVID list, so I don't know if that's because he tested positive or if it's a close contact thing, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to play. But he now has 3 games in a row with a touchdown, but only 2 catches last week. The Jags are tied for the 7th most touchdowns to wide receivers. They're tied for the 8th most explosive plays allowed to wide receivers. So if there's a game to start this guy, this is definitely the game. I very rarely draft guys like this. I draft for consistency, so I don't really have any stocks in Hollywood Brown. But if you've made it this far with this guy in your lineup, then I don't see a reason to sit him. Buccaneers at the Falcons. Got to keep an eye on Julio Jones. Not sure if he's going to play in this game. Ronald Jones, another guy. He had surgery on his pinky or something like that, so not sure if he's going to be able to play. If he misses, Leonard Fournette should become a must start. Now, if they can get Antonio Brown out of the way, that would be awesome. He takes Scotty Miller with him too. Really, that dude's been nothing but a massive thorn in my ass and every other Chris Godwin owner's ass out there. But Mike Evans, I think, is really the only Buccaneers wide receiver you can start confidently because of those red zone targets. I have Chris Godwin in one league, and I don't know what the hell to do with them this week. Luckily, I have Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf in that league. I kind of went hard on those 3 wide receivers. They were targets of mine going into that league, and So I got DK and Ridley holding down my 2 wide receiver spots, so I only really need to count on Godwin as a flex. It's a pretty awesome matchup for wide receivers here, but and not so much for Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette, whichever one of them start. The Falcons are actually a pretty tough run defense, but I'm going to have a hell of a time figuring out who I'm going to flex in that league that I have Chris Godwin. I will actually get to that in a little bit. Gronk against the Falcons should be money. Gronk seems to be the only guy for the Buccaneers that you know is going to get his targets with Brady. Atlanta has been the best matchup for tight ends all year until Darren Waller absolutely spanked the Jets. So Gronk, I think, is a good start. Calvin Ridley, obviously, yes, give me Calvin Ridley. Hayden Hurst was a huge disappointment last week with no Julio. Hurst had just 1 catch for the second game in a row now. 3 of his last 4 games he's either had 1 or no catches. But it's a good matchup here. Bucks are in the top 8 in receptions and receiving yards allowed to tight ends. 7 touchdowns allowed. Maybe, just maybe, we can get lucky and get a good game out of Hayden Hurst. But I'm not even going to begin to consider playing any of these Falcon running backs this week. I don't care what Dalvin Cook did to Tampa Bay last week. I'm not starting any of these dudes for Atlanta. Lions and Titans. Kenny Golladay did not practice again, I saw today on Thursday. Not sure if he's going to be able to play. DeAndre Swift. The Titans have been an average run defense, so Swift only got 7 of the 15 rushing attempts last week, but it was his first game back since the concussion. So hopefully this week they give him a full 12 to 15 touches. Adrian Peterson is still going to get his. TJ Hawkinson finally had a TD without Kenny Golladay in the lineup. Of course, the week that I did not have him in my touchdown tight end ticket, but it's all good. He's one of, I'd say, only really 4 must-start tight ends, so definitely get him in your lineup. Danny Amendola led the team with 66 receiving yards, and Marvin Jones was second on the team in targets, about 7 half PPR fantasy points. The Titans' pass defense has not been great, but 9th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers by the Titans. With this matchup, if Matthew Stafford plays and Kenny Golladay misses again, I think these guys can be considered flex options. If Golladay doesn't play and Matthew Stafford don't play, then I'm not starting either Amendola or Marvin Jones. I don't even know who the backup quarterback is there. Derrick Henry is going to be fun to watch this week. He costs $10,200 on FanDuel. The Lions have allowed a staggering 23 touchdowns to running backs this year, 5 more than the next closest team. So you can bet your sweet ass Derrick Henry is going to be on my touchdown, be among my touchdown scorers for the podcast picks this week. A.J. Brown and Corey Davis are both starts as well. I know Corey Davis kind of disappointed last week, but I'm going to keep him in the lineup. Jonnu Smith, the Titan tight end situation got even more swampy last week with Jeff Swam catching his first touchdown of the year. The Lions did just let Robert Tonyan score last week, but they haven't really been bad against tight ends this year. Second fewest receptions and receiving yards allowed to tight ends. I'm sitting Jonnu this week. I can see this game looking very similar to that Titans Week 12 matchup when Derrick Henry had 178 rushing yards and the Titans ran the ball 40 times, and Jonnu didn't see a single target. So, yeah, I'm sitting Jonnu Smith. Texans at Colts. Brandon Cooks is questionable coming into this game. For the Texans, Buddy Howell led the team in carries last week and rushing yards, while Chad Henson saw the most targets, caught all 7 of them, and led the team with 56 receiving yards. Kiki Kuti caught the team's only touchdown, but I think this team has become a wasteland of dudes that I want nothing to do with starting. For the Colts, Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, second best matchup for running backs behind just the Lions right now. T.Y. Hilton is having a ridiculous finish to the season, 277 yards on 17 catches and 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. It took him and Phillip Rivers 11 weeks to get on the same page, but they are definitely in the zone right now. These two teams just played each other 2 weeks ago, and Hilton had his season high in targets, receptions, and yards, so he should have another pretty solid game here. To all the people that I told to drop T.Y. Hilton after week 7 or week 8, I seriously apologize. Michael Pittman, second in targets last week. He caught all 5 of his targets when he played Houston 2 weeks ago, but he drops a lot of balls. Only 2 catches on 5 targets last week. He was lucky to get more get me 5 fantasy points last week in one of my dynasty leagues, filling in for Kenny Galladay. But I'm not starting him unless I have to. Eagles at Cardinals. Miles Sanders had his best game of the year thanks to an 82-yard run, 2 touchdowns, and also caught 4 balls for the first time since week 3. Is that the Jalen Hurts effect? I don't know, but I'm definitely going to start him again here against the Cardinals. Dallas Goedert, I think, is the only other sit for the Eagles. Jalen Reagor has yet to crack 60 yards this year, hasn't caught more than 4 balls this year, 5 of his 8 games with under 4 catches, so I'm not starting Jalen Reagor. Kenyon Drake and DeAndre Hopkins, I think, are the 2 confident plays for the Cardinals. Christian Kirk has fallen off completely. Don't play him. The Eagles have allowed the 5th fewest receptions to running backs, so I'm also going to be sitting Chase Edmonds this week. One interesting play, though, Dan Arnold has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. The Eagles have allowed the 7th most touchdowns to tight ends, so friggin' Dan Arnold might earn his spot on the tight end touchdown parlay. Jets at Rams. Denzel Mims is questionable coming into this one, but I'm going to make it simple. Do not start any of the Jets players here. Cam Akers, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, pretty easy to me. Those are the 3 must starts. And then Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett are both nice options this week. For us Gesicki owners, the Jets are the best matchup for tight ends after what they did against Darren Waller. Chiefs at Saints. Clyde got knocked down to a bench spot for me 2 weeks ago when he played, but he didn't play. I have to decide between CEH, Chris Godwin, Kareem Hunt, and Naheem Hines in a league, and there's just no way in hell I'm going to make the right call. It's a flex play that I got to choose from these guys. Obviously, Clyde's first game with over 4 catches was last week, first time since week 3. But the Saints have allowed the 3rd fewest rushing and 3rd fewest receiving yards to running backs, and that's including the 136-yard game that Miles Sanders just had last week. Plus, you got Le'Veon Bell lurking in the background to steal carries, so Clyde really scares me. Tyreek Hill hit his over for receiving yards by a half yard for me last week, so that was pretty awesome. Travis Kelce is about to break records for catches and yards, I think, by a tight end in a single season, so we're obviously playing both of those guys. The question mark for the Chiefs is Sammy Watkins. I think Watkins is another cheap DFS guy in a game that should be high scoring, so maybe you fill out the rest of your lineup, leave one of those wide receiver spots open for a cheap guy like Sammy Watkins. Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas are both starting for us this week. Jared Cook, back-to-back games now with a touchdown. The Chiefs are 4th in receiving yards allowed to tight ends, but Jared Cook is not a yardage guy. He's a touchdown or bust guy. He's pretty much as touchdown or bust as it gets. Only 28 catches in 12 games this year. I'm not starting him, but I will be interested in his yardage prop if he catches 1 or 2 balls. The Chiefs, they do let tight ends kind of scream down the middle of the field there. A couple games left here. Browns at Giants. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both finished with 100-plus total yards. Both scored twice. Both are must-starts, if you ask me. Jarvis Landry hit his reception prop again for me last week. That's now 3 weeks in a row, I think. Giants are in the top 12 in receptions allowed. So, yeah, he's a start, and I will again be looking at his reception prop number. If it's 4.5 again, it's easy money at this point. Rashad Higgins has been pretty damn good in his last 2 games, 6 catches and 2 touchdowns in each game with 160 combined yards, 19 targets over the last 2 games. Another guy I think is a great option in daily fantasy this week. Austin Hooper, Harrison Bryant, and David Njoku. Too many guys here. Can't trust any one of them. And the Giants only allowed 3 touchdowns to tight ends, so I'm staying away completely from these 3 guys. Wayne Gallman is a sit for me. The Browns' run D is pretty good, and the Giants' O-line looked incredibly bad last week. I don't think I can start any Giants. Maybe Evan Ingram. The Browns have allowed the 3rd most receptions, and I'm interested in his reception prop this week as well. 3 times this year, Evan Ingram has only caught 2 balls, and in the following game, he's followed up in those 3 games with at least 6 catches. So, Can this week be fourth? I might sprinkle a little bit on that bet just to see if the trend continues. Last but not least here, we got the Steelers at the Bengals. Another completely unbalanced offensive game for the Steelers last week. Only 17 rushing attempts, 10 for James Conner for only 18 yards. This must be the game that the Steelers at least try to get back on track with the running game. The Bengals are fourth in rushing yards allowed this season. I can't trust James Conner for my fantasy team, but he's another guy that I will very much be interested in his yardage prop come Sunday morning. Juju had a nice game last week. I said he was my favorite Steelers wide receiver last week, and he led the team in catches and yards, and he scored. So last week we saw the most even distribution of targets for the Steelers all year. The 4 wide receivers and Eric Ebron all had between 5 and 7 targets. James Washington was really the only Steeler wide receiver besides Juju to score last week, but I think for this game, I'm only interested in starting Juju, Claypool, or Deontay. I think they just run the ball a little bit more, and it seems like in those games, James Washington is the first one out. So because I really think that we see James Conner get back on track, I'm only going to go with Juju, Claypool, and Deontay Johnson. I've hit on the Bengals team total under now for 2 weeks in a row, and I think I'm going to hit it again this week. Only 7 points in each of the last 2 games. The Steelers coming off back-to-back losses, looking to get back on track against the division rival Bengals. It opened at 13.5. I have not looked to see what it has dropped to. But unless we get like a defensive score or a special team score, I don't see how the Bengals can score over 10 points, especially if Ryan Finley is going to be the starter at quarterback. I'm actually bringing it up right now to see what the home team total points is. So it's only dropped half a point. This is Thursday night. If you're listening on Friday and it's still at 13 or even 12.5, I would jump on that under. So it's hit 2 weeks in a row. This is a pretty bad offense versus a very good defense. So give me the team total for the Bengals under 13.5. That's going to do it for the matchups. Let's take a minute and I will drop in the podcast picks for week 15. All right. Week 15 podcast picks. So last week I went 6-3, slowly creeping back to the 60% mark that I want to finish at for the year. Got 3 weeks left, so let's get at it. My first pick against the spread is going to be the Cleveland Browns at the New York Football Giants. The Giants' offensive line looked like a bad high school offensive line last week. 5 sacks allowed to just Hassan Riddick, who I traded for in my All-IDP league a few months ago, or probably 6 weeks ago now. So thank you very much, Cousin James. You are a very kind gentleman. Jason Garrett will not be calling plays because of a COVID-19 issue. So it will be Freddie Kitchens in the quarterback's ear, whoever plays quarterback for the Giants. If it's Colt McCoy, it will be a very special game, a double special game, because
revenge.
Colt McCoy spent a couple years over there in Cleveland. I think he started his career there, if I remember correctly. I should have looked that up. And then you had Freddie Kitchens, who was a one-and-done head coach last year. So, I think the Browns are going to go in and spank up the Giants. The second pick against the spread this week is going to be the Colts, -6.5 against the Texans. Got to look. I know some places have it at 7.5. Some places have it at 7. When I wrote this up, it was still 6.5. So that's the number I'm going to go with. The Texans have allowed the most rushing yards this season. The Colts are among the top of the league as far as running the ball with their running backs. I think the Colts continue to dominate games with Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines. The Texans' offense has been stripped of all of its top talent, from DeAndre Hopkins getting traded, Kenny Stills getting cut, Will Fuller getting suspended, Brandon Cooks and David Johnson going in and out of the lineup with injuries, although I did see that David Johnson was activated, so he'll probably play in this game, but still, I don't really care. They just lost to Mitchell Trubisky and the Bears by 29 freaking points, boys. boys and girls, sorry. I like the Colts to win by at least a touchdown. Then the third pick is going to be the Seattle Seahawks, minus 5.5 at the Washington football team. Seahawks are 3-1 right now on the East Coast, so that East Coast trip has not really affected them all that much this year. The Seahawks got back on track with a fluffer game against the Jets last week. I think it was just what they needed. I know Washington has looked great over the last few weeks. Their defense is starting to look like it's going to be a real problem in the NFC for years to come. But I think Russell Wilson knows it's time for them to put the pedal to the metal and start that playoff push. I think Seattle can win by a touchdown in this game against the Washington football team. My over for Week 15, I'm going to be a coward again here, but if Christian McCaffrey plays, I like the Panthers at the Packers over 51.5. Packers have allowed a boatload of touchdowns to running backs this year, and if Christian McCaffrey plays, you know that offense goes through him. Aaron Rodgers is going to continue this crazy comeback season, and the Packers will get their 30 points at least. I think the Panthers can score 21-24 against the Packers, even if DJ Moore doesn't play. But again, this is all predicated on Christian McCaffrey playing in this game. If he does not play, my backup over is going to be the Buccaneers at the Falcons over 49.5. Two of the best run defenses in the league, two of the more high-powered offenses in the league. I think all the COVID issues at the specialist positions for Tampa Bay, their punter, kicker, and long snapper, all apparently on the COVID list, which I remember hearing a quote from Jimmy Johnson a couple years ago. He said that the most important player on your team is your quarterback, and the second most important player on your team is your long snapper. So I think that's pretty significant when your long snapper is, halfway through the week, all of a sudden he's out. So I think that's going to kind of force Tampa Bay to be a little more aggressive on offense. So again, if McCaffrey does not play, give me Tampa and Atlanta over 49.5. I think they can hit 50 points in that game. My under for Week 15 is going to be the Patriots at the Dolphins, under 41.5 points. This game finished at 31 total points in Week 1, and that was with Fitzpatrick at quarterback. The Dolphins have scored, I think it's 4.5 points, on average 4.5 points less in games that Tua started than when Fitzpatrick started, so I think that's significant. The Dolphins have a bunch of injury concerns, with three of their best offensive players, and one of their best defensive players. So this is two defensive-minded head coaches going at it. Another one of these Bill Belichick disciples going back up against Bill Belichick. So it's in Miami. So it would be better for our under if it was in New England at this time of the year, but it is what it is. I still like the under 41.5 in that game. My TD scores for Week 15, I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor again, man. 55 carries and 9 catches over his last 3 games. Averaged over 120 total yards in his last 3 games, 3 touchdowns over the last 2 games. Taylor actually has 31 catches on 32 targets, and that the one ball that he was not able to bring in was not a drop. It was an overthrow. So he's not just been a big runner, he's producing in the passing game as well, which was kind of one of the knocks on him coming out of college is this guy going to be able to contribute in the passing game? And he's clearly doing that. So Houston has allowed the 5th most touchdowns to running backs this year. Give me Jonathan Taylor for the 3rd week in a row as one of my TD scores. The big chalk pick here for the week is going to be Derrick Henry. He gets Detroit, the team that has allowed more touchdowns to running backs than anybody else. This one is going to be expensive, but I think it's a nice little parlay piece because honestly, I think it's the most confident play of any podcast pick of all time, really. Derrick Henry should dominate the Detroit Lions. And then my 3rd pick, I'm going with a wide receiver. I'm going with Brandon Ayuk. 6 touchdowns this year. The Cowboys have allowed the most touchdowns to wide receivers. Ayuk has turned into a real red zone monster, leads the team in red zone targets now. For a team that loves to throw the ball to their running backs and their tight ends, I think it's significant for a rookie to lead the team in in red zone targets. So it looks like Deebo Samuels won't play this week, which should mean even more targets for Brandon Ayuk. I really like him to score this week. And that leaves, last but not least, the road dog of the week.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
So I feel like I come up on this podcast and I bitch and moan every week about how hard it is to pick these road dogs of the week. But of all of my podcast picks, this is the one I've been the most successful on. And at my first glance going through all of the road dogs this week, this one stood out to me the most. And I've had pretty good luck so far this year just going with my gut. And so I'm going to be going with the Patriots plus 1.5 at the Dolphins. Belichick is 21-5 versus rookie quarterbacks over the years. Heard that on Pardon the Interruption earlier today, my favorite show since I was like 11 years old. Got to get home in time to watch Pardon the Interruption. But I mentioned during the under, the Dolphins are dealing with a lot of injuries here. Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki, half of their running backs. They got some guys on defense that may miss this game. I think Belichick does what he did to Justin Herbert 2 weeks ago and that Chargers offense and just completely shut them down. Although it pains me to do it, I think I got to take the Patriots getting points at the Dolphins, although it kind of sucks only getting 1.5. I mean, if you're really going to play the dog, if you're going to take points on the dog, I know it opened at 2.5. Why not buy yourself that extra point? Put that field goal on your side. Anytime I'm looking at a tight game, I'll try and put the 3.5 on my side. As far as parlay pieces go, if you're just taking them straight up, you might as well take the money line. But taking them, getting 3.5. That way you only need them to win by a field goal. So that is going to be the podcast pick, the Patriots plus 1.5, the road dog of the week. And that's going to do it for the show this week. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Hopefully you can win your playoff matchup here, or if you're just tuning in for the DFS tips and sleepers and whatnot, I appreciate that too. Hopefully you can win some money this weekend. A whole bunch of good props to choose from with all these games going on. So as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.
100% new, still 100% Caddy. The 5th generation all-new Caddy Cargo is more innovative, dynamic and efficient than ever before. With €1,500 purchase contribution plus a Caddy Cargo service plan for €9.99. Contact your local Volkswagen commercial vehicles dealer or visit volkswagenvans.ie to reserve yours now. T's and C's apply.
Hey mate, it's me, your hunch. I gotta say, nothing feels as good as taking a punt on Betway's 4 to score. 1 or 2 goals feel like this. 3 like this. But picking the first goal scorer in 4 selected matches sounds great.
Heed your hunch with Betway's 4 to score for the jackpot. UK and Ireland customers only. Selections must be submitted before kick-off in the first eligible match. Where there is more than one winner, jackpot will be divided. 1 entry per registered account holder per round. Full terms apply. Bet the responsible way. 18+ on Louis.net.